In the heart of a bustling city stood a McDonald's like no other, tucked away on the edge of town. This particular fast food joint had a reputation for serving up more than just burgers and fries. It was rumored to be a hotspot for the supernatural. It was a quiet night at the Mcchorror drive-thru. The neon lights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows across the empty parking lot. The only sound was the faint hum of the fluorescent bulbs and the occasional rumble of a passing car. Inside the restaurant, Sarah, a college student working the late shift, was beginning to regret her decision to pick up an extra shift. She had heard the stories about the Mcchorror drive-thru, the strange sightings, the unexplained noises, but she had brushed them off as nothing more than urban legends. As the night wore on, Sarah found herself growing increasingly uneasy. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every creak of the floorboard sending a shiver down her spine. She tried to shake off the feeling, focusing on her tasks and counting down the minutes until closing time. But just as she was about to lock up for the night, the drive-thru intercom crackled to life. Sarah jumped, startled by the sudden noise, and hesitantly pressed the button to respond. "Welcome to Mcchorror drive-thru. How can I help you?" she said, trying to keep her voice steady. There was no response, just static on the other end. Sarah frowned, about to repeat herself, when a voice spoke through the intercom. A voice that sent a chill down her spine. "I'll have a Big Mac meal." "With extra screams," the voice said, low and menacing. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the intercom in disbelief. It had to be a prank, she told herself. But when she looked out the window, she saw a car sitting in the drive-thru lane, a car that hadn't been there a moment ago. Trembling, Sarah filled the order, her hands shaking as she bagged up the food. She handed it out the window to the waiting car, but when she looked inside, there was no one there. The car was empty, the seats covered in dust and cobwebs. With a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach, Sarah watched as the car pulled away, disappearing into the night. She locked up the restaurant and hurried home. The image of the empty car burned into her mind. The next day, Sarah returned to work, hoping it had all been a figment of her imagination. But as she passed by the drive-thru, she saw something that made her blood run cold, a receipt left behind by the mysterious customer. Printed in bold letters at the bottom were the words, "Thank you for dining at Mcchorror drive-thru. We hope you enjoy your meal and your nightmares." In the heart of a small town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests stood an old, dilapidated building, a relic of a forgotten era. It was once a thriving McDonald's restaurant, but now it lay abandoned, its golden arches tarnished, and its windows boarded up. The people in the town whispered tales of strange occurrences at the Mccastle, stories that sent shivers down the spine of anyone who dared to listen. Legend had it that the Mccastle was cursed, haunted by the spirits of those who had suffered within its walls. Decades ago, the restaurant had been a bustling hub of activity, serving up greasy burgers and salty fries to hungry customers. But behind the cheerful facade lurked something sinister, something that had driven the employees to madness and despair. One stormy night, a group of curious teenagers decided to explore the abandoned Mccastle, seeking thrills and adventure. They laughed and joked as they made their way through the overgrown parking lot, but their mirth faded as they stepped inside the crumbling building. The air was thick with dust and decay, and the faint smell of cooking grease lingered in the darkness. As they ventured further into the restaurant, they heard strange noises, whispers echoing through the empty halls, the creaking of floorboards beneath their feet. They laughed nervously, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that settled over them like a heavy blanket. But the Mccastle had other plans for them. They stumbled upon the kitchen, its stainless steel surfaces tarnished and stained. A flickering light overhead cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the smell of rotten food filled the air. Suddenly, they heard a voice, a raspy whisper that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Welcome to the Mccastle," it said, sending chills down their spines. The teenagers froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. They looked around frantically, but there was no one there. The voice spoke again, closer this time, its words dripping with malice. "You shouldn't have come here. This place is cursed." They turned to flee, but the doors slammed shut with a deafening crash, trapping them inside. Panic set in as they pounded on the doors, screaming for help, but their cries went unanswered. They were alone in the darkness, at the mercy of whatever lurked within the Mccastle's walls. Suddenly the lights flickered and died, plunging the restaurant into pitch-black darkness. The teenagers huddled together, their fear palpable in the air. And then they heard it, the sound of footsteps echoing through the empty halls, growing louder and louder with each passing moment. They turned to run, but it was too late. Something grabbed hold of them, something cold and clammy, its touch sending shivers down their spines. They screamed as they were dragged into the depths of the Mccastle, their voices drowned out by the howling wind outside. And as the storm raged on, the Mccastle stood silent and still, its secrets buried deep within its crumbling walls. But those who dared to pass by could still hear the echoes of their screams, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurked within the abandoned McDonald's restaurant known as the Mccastle. Maple Street was a typical suburban road lined with neatly trimmed lawns and cookie-cutter houses. But there was one house on Maple Street that stood out, a McDonald's that had been converted into a family home. It was a quirky sight, with the familiar golden arches still visible above the door. The Johnson family had moved into the old McDonald's a few months ago, excited to turn it into their dream home. But as the days passed, strange things began to happen. It started with small, harmless pranks, objects moving on their own, strange noises in the middle of the night, but soon the pranks turned sinister, and the Johnsons realized they were not alone in their new home. One night, as they sat down to dinner in their makeshift dining room, they heard the sound of footsteps coming from the kitchen. They exchanged nervous glances, but when they went to investigate, they found nothing out of the ordinary. They shrugged it off as their imagination playing tricks on them, and returned to their meal. But as the weeks went by, the disturbances became more frequent and more terrifying. Objects would fly off shelves, doors would slam shut on their own, and the sound of children's laughter would echo through the empty halls. The Johnsons were at their wits' end, desperate to find an explanation for the strange occurrences in their home. One night, as they were preparing to go to bed, they heard a knock at the door. They opened it to find a delivery driver standing on their doorstep, holding a bag of McDonald's takeout. He explained that he had been sent to deliver the food to their address, but when he arrived, he found himself standing in front of a house, not a restaurant. The Johnsons were puzzled. How could someone mistake their home for a McDonald's? But when they looked closer at the takeout bag, they saw something that made their blood run cold. Stamped on the bottom of the bag was a message written in faded ink. "Welcome back to the Mac House. Enjoy your meal." The Johnsons felt a chill creep down their spines as they realized the truth. Their home was haunted by the spirits of the old McDonald's restaurant. The golden arches that once symbolized fast food and family meals now represented something far more sinister, a portal to the world of the undead. As they sat in their living room, surrounded by the echoes of laughter and the smell of French fries, the Johnsons knew they had to leave Maple Street behind. But as they packed their bags and prepared to flee, they couldn't shake the feeling that the Mcchorror would follow them wherever they went, a reminder of the horrors that lurked within the walls of their once happy home.